Hey everyone, today I'm going to review the Asus ProArt PA32UCG monitor. This uses a 10-bit 4K UHD IPS panel with mini LED backlight that can go up all the way to 1600 nits for brightness for HDR, and this can run up to 120 Hz. Now, first of all, disclaimer, this is a review unit on loan from Asus Singapore. Big thanks again to them for providing yet another review unit. And second disclaimer, I don't actually have the necessary hardware to be able to test this monitor to its true potential, so there are certain things I won't be able to show you, like I won't be able to run this at 4K 120 Hz, but I will tell you about other things like the dimming zones, how effective they are, the mini LED, color accuracy, and what kind of workflow can you expect when you're using this monitor. This monitor is targeted at game developers and video editors who need color accuracy, but more specifically, this is really for game developers because this can run at 4K HDR at 120 Hz. I guess you can game on this, but the price of this monitor, it's on the high side. Here in Singapore, it's priced at 5,399 Singapore dollars, which translates to around 4,000 US dollars, and that's for the bundle. The monitor plus this X-Rite i1 Display Pro Color Calibrator bundle. You can buy the monitor without the color calibrator if you already have one. If I remember correctly, this is US $259. At the time of this review, there is no 27-inch model for this. My review will be from the perspective of a visual content creator, someone who does graphic design, print design, edits photos, and YouTube videos. Unfortunately, I do not game. These are some of the items included in the box. There is the quick start guide and manual. By the way, I highly recommend you go online to take a look at their online PDF manual because there may be certain features that I won't be able to cover in this review, or I may accidentally leave them out. This is the back panel to cover the cables and the ports. A 1.5 meter long Thunderbolt 3 cable. This is a 1 meter long USB Type A to USB Type C cable. This cable, it's a bit short. Full-size HDMI to full-size HDMI. This is 2 meters. Full-size DisplayPort to full-size DisplayPort. This is also 2 meters, and depending on which country you are in, they should ship with the appropriate power plug. This is the factory color calibration testing report. The average delta E for color accuracy is less than 2, and for color uniformity, the delta E is less than 4. They have tested sRGB, Adobe RGB, DCI-P3, grayscale tracking, gamma value. This is for the uniformity test. And this is for the luminance or the brightness test. The stand comes in one piece. The build quality is excellent. It's very solid. It's also extremely heavy. This is more than 4 kg. And as you can see, the base is huge. There's this nice matte texture on this, but this is definitely going to take up a lot of space on your table. This is how big the stand is compared to this Apple wireless keyboard without the number pad. And this is how it looks from the side, and from the back there is this small hole here for cable management. And this is how big this 32-inch monitor is. It's almost as big as my small table, which is 80 by 50 centimeters. Be very careful when you are carrying this because it's very heavy. It's 9.7 kg without the stand. With the stand, it's 14.6 kg. So the power light indicator is down here, which is nice. The light points downwards. The back has this horizontal textured pattern on it, and it's matte. Logo is here. This monitor can be VESA mounted, and the VESA mount dimensions are 10 by 10 centimeters. On this side are the buttons for the OSD menu and the power button. All the ports at the bottom are labeled. This monitor is so thick it can stand up on its own. This is about 5.7 centimeters and it comes thicker towards the back here because it curves here, and all these vents you can see are for ventilation. There are fans inside this monitor. The fan noise is inaudible with normal use. There are also small holes on the side of the monitor for installing the shading hood. Shading hoods are incredibly useful because they can help block out unwanted light sources. But this shading hood, it's not the best. It's flimsy, and this material here, this is not black. This is just some dark gray. Compared to my mouse pad, which is black, you can see the difference. But anyway, it does an effective job blocking out light. To install the shading hood, you have to use these plastic pins to pin into the holes. It's not that secure. You'll be better off just taping the shading hood to the monitor. That's for the power. There is a physical power switch in addition to the power button you saw earlier. 3.5mm audio jack, full-size display port version 1.4, DSC, 3 full-size HDMI ports. This is version 2.1, version 2, version 2. Beside the HDMI port is this USB 2 port which is covered. This is for servicing, for troubleshooting. Thunderbolt 3 input, Thunderbolt 3 output. This monitor supports daisy chaining, and these are 3 USB 3.1 Type A ports. This Thunderbolt 3 port is for video input, whereas this is for video output. There is 60 watts power delivery for this. For all the other USB ports, they only have 15 watt. This is a massive monitor. The design looks good. I like the thin bezels at the top and on the sides. The bottom here is thicker. The surface is matte with anti-glare. So right now I have light source coming in from the right side. You can see the anti-glare doing its work. However, if you really want to block out the light, you have to install the shading hood. So this is how the display looks, as if there are shading hoods installed. And take a look at the anti-glare on the right side. Using a Spider 5 Pro color calibrator, I calibrated the display and measured color support for 98% NTSC, 100% Adobe RGB, 95% P3, and 100% sRGB. Now, according to Asus, they say this monitor can go up all the way to 98% P3. Asus, they do provide this Asus color calibration software for additional color adjustments. Color accuracy for this monitor is terrific. You can certainly use this monitor to edit photos and videos, but to edit normal photos and videos, this monitor is a serious overkill. This is for editing HDR content because it supports HDR all the way up to 1600 nits. Based on what I've measured, I measured 1497 nits maximum brightness, so that's really bright. The 4K resolution on this 32-inch display is terrific. When I look at this photo on my other monitors, it looks alright, just that now with more resolution, I can see more details, I can see the flaws more easily. I'm currently using this monitor with Mac OS, and this combination of 32-inch and 4K is actually not optimal for Mac OS. Let me show you why. So the menu bar, the icons on this are kind of small. You can use system preferences to adjust the scaling. So you can adjust the scaling to make the text, the icons larger. With certain graphic design software, there may be some scaling issues. So let me show you Photoshop. I'm going to create a 4K resolution file, 4K UHD. So this is the 4K UHD resolution file at 100%. Since this is at 100%, by right it should scale up to fill the whole display, but it doesn't. So this is the issue with scaling with macOS. If you are using Windows, you're not going to get this problem. Let's take a look at the OSD and what you can change. So these are shortcuts. Remember the vertical column of shortcuts, so you can press one of those buttons to get into one of these shortcuts very quickly. So let me press the HDR button. This allows you to change to different HDR preview modes very quickly. However, if you want to change out of the preview mode, you have to go through the long way, which is one button press, 2, 3, and then check the standard mode again. So here are the different color modes. Switching between them will switch between the different color modes. And the HDR color modes are here. It takes a few seconds for the color modes to change from these standard ones to HDR. Blue light filter. These are the different color settings, brightness, contrast, saturation, hue, color temperature, gamma, sharpness, input range. There are built-in speakers on this display, but the quality it's so-so. There are picture-by-picture settings functionality here. And these are the input sources. HDR preview is on. There is AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, dynamic dimming. So this will basically affect how fast the dimming zones will light up or disable. I have just turned this monitor away from my window because without the shading hood, the anti-glare is starting to annoy me. Now this monitor uses Mini LED for backlight, which is to say that there are a lot more LEDs now, which is why the brightness can be so bright. Maximum screen brightness is 1000 nits. For HDR screen brightness, I measured up to 1497 nits, which is really bright. This monitor has 1152 dimming zones, and there are some issues with the dimming zones. Let's take a look here. I hope my camera can capture this accurately. So see this parallel horizontal lines. There is white and gray lines, but as they move towards the right side here, you can see there is no more contrast. So what I think is happening is the dimming zones in this black area here, they are not lit, so they are not providing light, in which case they cannot light up the area here to create that contrast. But for some reason, this whole area is still lit. Pay attention to this area here as I switch off the dimming zone. And now it's off. Can you see the contrast? And now let me turn it back on. Again, there's this loss of contrast. There are no issues with the contrast here because the dimming zones for all this area it's lit. Let's move this window onto the lit area. So yep, now I can see all the contrast. And as I move to the right side, I can still see the contrast. But after a few seconds, the dimming zones will just become dim, and now it has lost contrast again. I've moved this window to a new position. So this part here is in front of 100% black. This part here is in front of 90% black. And from what I can see, there is contrast here. But here there is no contrast, so it seems like the dimming zone here is turned off. Here's a closer look. So here you can see some contrast. You can see the parallel lines, but here you don't see them anymore. With dynamic dimming, when you move a bright area against a black background to somewhere else very quickly, you can actually see the dynamic dimming working in real time. So pay attention to this area here when I move this to the right side. Do you see that? Do you see that on the left side? So the dynamic dimming is turning on and off depending on where I'm moving this window. And you can adjust the speed of how fast the dimming zones turn on and off using the UHD manuals. So I've just turned off dynamic dimming, and now when I move the window from left to right, I don't see anything unusual. When I see the dynamic dimming doing its work, that to me is a bit distracting. Let me show you other issues with dynamic dimming zones. So currently I have this 1 pixel border for this art board. Now, just having a few pixels on the display which is predominantly black, like if you have a mouse cursor with some white moving around, it's not going to turn on the dimming zones. It's not going to light the dimming zones. So let me show you what happens when I use a brush, a white brush, and place a dot here. Now with the previous model, the Asus PA32UCG, there is noticeable blooming or glow outside this circle, like this black area here. It will show noticeable glow, but here it is very well controlled. This is a very huge improvement over the previous model. So let me move that dot to the right side while I paint a larger area here. So as I paint this area here, I can see the white, which is actually very light gray, become white as I paint a much larger area. And when I compare this to this, I can see this is white, whereas this is slightly off-white. It's very slight gray. Depending on the work that you are creating, you may or may not see this funky dynamic zone dimming effect. And this only happens when the display is predominantly black. Even if it is 95% black, all the dimming zones will be lit. So it has to be 100% black for the dimming zones to turn off completely. I've just filled the whole display with a very light gray to show you whether there is any color shifting when you are viewing from different angles. So let's take a look from this side. There is slight color shifting. You can see the left side, it becomes darker, and here as well, slight color shifting at the left and right edges. But when you are viewing the display from the front, it looks alright. If you are seated very close to the display and you look left and right, the color shifting will be more obvious. I notice something unusual here. I'm not sure if my camera can capture this, but there is a color patch here. You can see that patch there. Now overall viewing angle, it's good. Panel uniformity during daytime, it looks good. I'm not sure if there is any shadow effect at the edges. It could be my eyes playing tricks on me. Anyway, it's very minimal compared to the M1 iPad Pro, which has very noticeable shadow effect here. It's very difficult for me to actually see any. By the way, when you are testing the monitor, I recommend you have the monitor run at maximum brightness for a few minutes to see if there are any flickering issues. Because when I ran this at maximum brightness, I could see this area here. It actually flickered. So that's not nice. But now with normal brightness, it seems to be in proper working condition. Let's see how dynamic dimming looks at night. So I am able to see glow around the lit pixels, which are, by the way, the palettes on the side here, as well as for the toolbar on the left and the toolbar at the top. Alright, so dynamic dimming is now turned off. The blacks are no longer blacks. Now I can see the backlight glowing through. So this is with dynamic dimming off. Let's turn it back on again. So immediately you can see the IPS glow it disappears, but now I'm able to see the glowing beside all the lit pixels. Movie watching experience on this monitor is excellent both during daytime and in a pitch dark room, like what you see here. There is some glowing at the high contrast areas, basically where the lit pixels are against or beside the black background, but the glow is not that obvious because, at least with this particular scene, because the contrast is so strong, our eyes are not able to really detect that glow. If I look close, I can see some glow at the controls there at the bottom, but again, it's very difficult for me to really look for the glow unless I'm looking out for it. Generally speaking, the blacks, they still look really black. Let's move to the side. So you can see some color shift. The sky is now less white and the area over there, it's darker. Now I'm going to turn off dynamic dimming to see how the IPS glow affects the viewing experience. So let's turn this off. The camera is not able to capture IPS glow because cameras are just not going to be as sensitive as our eyes. Now, from the front, when I'm watching this movie, yes, there is some backlight that is seeping through the black. It's not as dark compared to the black with dynamic dimming. The movie watching experience is still going to be really good because when we are watching movies like this, even if there is glow at the top and bottom black bars, our brain will automatically just tune those out. Overall movie watching experience on a display with mini LED and dynamic dimming zones is definitely more enjoyable. This is how panel uniformity looks with dynamic dimming. Basically everything is black except for this area here where the cursor is. There is glow around the cursor. When I reviewed the footage I recorded, I saw some issues with backlight bleed at the edges. I can see some wavy pattern. However, in real life I wasn't able to see the backlight bleed, and that's definitely not a problem when you are watching movies with black bars at the top and bottom. You won't be able to see those wavy patterns. And now let's talk about HDR video editing. I'm using Final Cut Pro on Mac OS. Now to edit HDR videos, you have to create a library with wide gamut HDR, otherwise all your project files will still be in SDR, standard dynamic range. And by the way, all these files here, all these are SDR projects. Now when you are editing, everything will still be shown in SDR, just that at the time of export, you can choose to export your videos in HDR. And with this monitor, you can choose to view your exported files in HDR later on. So that's the reason why people may want to buy a HDR monitor. It's really to edit your videos, your content in HDR, and then see your content in actual HDR. To show you the difference between SDR and HDR, let me first show you this HDR movie, which is currently playing in SDR, and this is the iPad Pro. So you see the flames here, they are almost blown out here as well. It's difficult to see any details within this shape here. And this is the same HDR movie now playing in HDR. So you see this same flame here. Now you can see a lot more details in the shape and here as well. And also I can see the colors more clearly. It's not like too bright to the extent it almost appears white. Here you can clearly see the colors and you can clearly see the extra details. I've just connected the iPad Pro 2021 to the Asus display using the Thunderbolt cable, and from what I can see, This movie is playing in HDR because I can no longer see the details within the flames, and also this area here, it looks like it's almost blown out. The movie on this iPad is HDR, but for some reason it's not able to output HDR movie signal to this display. Hence, this is playing at HDR. And now let me switch over to Apple TV 4K and play the same movie. Apple TV is able to output HDR with proper HDR signal. Note here, it says HDR is on. That HDR on alert box earlier is important because it tells you that this monitor is receiving HDR signal. So let's play the same movie. So now you can clearly see the details within the flames here, and also the colors are also more vibrant. The colors are no longer washed out. Let me switch back to the iPad Pro again. And now I'm going to switch to the HDR color space. Now let's choose this HDR HLG DCI. By the way, I've locked my camera exposure, so what you are looking at is all these areas being blown out because the brightness has increased, and this is really bright. Let me adjust the exposure of my camera down. So this is not HDR, it's just that the display is brighter, but I'm not sure if it's really showing true HDR effects like the extra details, the extra dynamic range in the highlights and in the shadow areas. Can you play 4K HDR movies from YouTube on this monitor? Yes, but you have to change the color space to HDR here, because if you don't do that, this is just going to be playing in HDR. This monitor cannot have this area in HDR and this area in HDR. The last thing I want to talk about is gaming. Now, I'm not qualified to talk about gaming because I do not play games and I do not develop games, but based on the specs of this monitor, I mean, it's 4K UHD, 120 Hz. If you want to run games at that resolution at 120 Hz, you will need to have a really powerful desktop, and this applies to game development as well. The response time is 5 milliseconds gray to gray. I'm not sure if there is any input lag when it comes to playing games. So I really cannot say much about gaming performance. If you do game on this monitor, please let me know in the comment section below what are the specifications for your desktop and how's the gaming performance like, because I would really love to know. Alright, so that's it for this very long review. I hope it's somewhat helpful. Thanks for watching, and leave me a question if you have any in the video description below. Bye!